Shrek. Shrek. Shrek was easily one of the most dominant franchises in the 2000s. Not only were the first couple movies huge when they came out, internet culture clung onto them for years to come, all the way up until 2018 or 2019 when those memes fell out of style. I still remember coming home after school and logging onto YouTube to see my recommended full of those videos that are like, Shrek, but every time they take a step, it speeds up. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't really know why those were popular. I mean, I definitely watched them when I was younger, but looking back at it, they don't really make sense. There's no jokes. It's just the video getting sped up. Nonetheless, I really don't think my childhood would be the same without Shrek. And I'm gonna make this video to see if anyone else had the same experience with this movie. I mean, it dominated such a large part of my early childhood and stayed relevant for like 20 years. So without further ado, let's get into the green cultural icon himself and just what made him so popular. Before we get started, I want to talk about what makes Shrek Shrek. What at the core is this movie about? And what makes it different from all the other animated movies that came out at the time? Which actually wasn't a lot since Shrek is actually really old. So I guess like what makes it different from all the other movies in general at the time? So Shrek is a fairy tale parody movie where they kind of mix pop culture and these old fairy tales into one thing. This is really carried into the fundamentals of the movie. If you look at the plot, you can really tell that it is just basically a ton of fairy tale cliches, and at a very surface level, it seems kind of boring. I mean, seriously, rescuing a princess from a castle. However, this movie is so much more than that. It's a will they won't they romance drama. It's an action-packed fantasy. It's a satire comedy. Shrek really has it all, and it almost constantly feels less like the plot is writing the characters and more like the characters are writing the plot. All of this really makes Shrek a movie for everyone. Let me ask you this. If you took a random person out of the population of America and showed them both Shrek and Spirited Away, which one do you think they're gonna enjoy more? I would say that Spirited Away is a better movie. However, I know that 9 times out of 10 they're gonna pick Shrek, and that really exhibits the brilliance of this movie. I mean, I really should say franchise because there's definitely more than one, and we'll talk about that. But the care for this franchise was not for nothing. With the first movie making around $500 million, and the entire franchise making around $3 billion total, the success of these movies is unprecedented. Even the fourth movie, which everyone seems to have forgotten, made around $700 million, which is almost 4 times as much as The Prince of Egypt. But where did all this success come from? How is DreamWorks, which was a newer studio at the time, rivaling the great Pixar in the box office? Well, I think we should start with where the world was at the time. Shrek was a movie that came out in the early 2000s. 3D animated movies were a brand new thing that had only been around for a few years. However, I think there is more about the movie itself that is at play here. We are on the tail end of the golden age of The Simpsons, which was a show all about flipping a genre on its head. I think it's very apparent that people really wanted to be surprised when they went into a movie theater, and Shrek was exactly that. I mean, the movie opens with a Smash Mouth song. Like, what in the world? Come on. Do you know how much this would have freaked out early 2000s audiences? I mean, if this movie came out today, people would be like, oh, it's trying too hard. But you have to think, this was the first time people have done this. I mean, maybe Hercules has some pop culture references and whatnot, but Shrek was on another level. I dare you to watch Shrek and then forget about it. Like, this is the most memorable movie of all time. Okay, like almost all time. And this isn't just because of the pop culture references or the adult humor. A lot of it stems from the amazing characters. The main duo, Shrek and Donkey, play off each other incredibly well the entire movie, and there are so many memorable lines that come out of their interactions.
Onions have layers. Ogres have layers.
And I like to remind everyone that the idea of having a strong female princess character was absolutely unheard of, because this is way before Disney overplayed it. And while I do think that the first movie is really famous for its humor, there's a lot more here to talk about. I believe the emotional conflicts in this movie, specifically of Shrek, are extremely relatable and dwarf a lot of other animated movies. They constantly play with these ideas of rejection and loneliness, which I guarantee you nobody was expecting when they went in to see a movie called Shrek that had multiple poop jokes in the first 5 minutes. But as I said before, the first movie actually grossed the least amount of money in the whole series. So what were the other movies like? Well, Shrek 2, the direct sequel to Shrek, is widely cited as the best movie in the whole franchise. Not only do they lean into these like pop culture references as before, I believe this one is much stronger humor-wise in general. And a large part of this is because Shrek 2 really doesn't lean on pop culture references as much, but rather relatable pop culture things such as having to go to your in-laws or an awkward family dinner. And while a second movie in a franchise almost always makes more money than the first, I definitely would say this one deserves it. However, that definitely can't be said for every movie in this franchise. Shrek the Third sucks. I'm not gonna go into why it sucks because that could be a whole video of its own, but what's important to note here is that Shrek the Third marks the downfall of this franchise. Shrek the Third made around $100 million less than Shrek 2, and then Shrek Forever After, the fourth movie, made $100 million less than it. And I don't think Shrek Forever After deserves this. I believe that Shrek the Third ruined this movie franchise for everyone and permanently messed with the way they remember these movies. And I can't really blame them. I mean, if I went and saw Shrek the Third, I would not watch the fourth one if it's just gonna be another Shrek the Third, especially considering the fact that by the time the fourth movie came out, it would be 2010, and animated movies were everywhere. Nonetheless, $750 million is still $750 million. It's clear that Shrek had an impact. And it did not go away after 2010. Shrek would see a number of spin-offs and specials produced for it between 2010 and the current year. This includes a spin-off that would come out in 2011 titled Puss in Boots, which, according to Wikipedia, actually made more than the original Shrek movie. And at the time of recording this, the sequel came out called Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Along with these spin-off movies, a number of specials and short films would be produced, along with a video game and even a musical. Which is just like absolutely bizarre. Like, how does that even come up in conversation? Hey, you know that Shrek movie we made 7 years ago? Let's do a Broadway musical. And then everyone just like said yes. And I haven't personally seen it, so for all I know, it could be an absolute masterpiece. Additionally, Shrek's influence reaches far outside its own IP. If we take a second to look at DreamWorks' filmography, we can see a noticeable change in what type of content they were producing before and after Shrek, going from works like The Prince of Egypt to things like the B-Movie and Madagascar movies. Along with this, we see the rise of studios such as Blue Skies and Illumination. And while Blue Skies definitely has some actual good movies mixed in with its garbage, I don't know if the same can be said for Illumination, maybe except Despicable Me 1. And whether or not it's a coincidence, the golden age of Disney began to dissipate by the late 90s and early 2000s. And I'm not a film studies student, so I don't really know if this is causational, but you could definitely make the argument that Shrek's success may have changed some studios' perspectives on the medium. And while this may be the case, I think Shrek still holds a very special place in my heart as one of my favorite movies growing up. And while it may be bashed for being crude or reference reliant, I still have a lot of appreciation for really what Shrek is and what it did. And whether or not you liked Shrek, I think we can all thank it for introducing an entire generation to Smash Mouth's All-Star.